We all understand that feeling. Your grade was doing okay at the beginning of the semester, but as it went on and the math got harder, you failed a couple tests, and now your grade is just sunk, and you don't think there's anything you can do. Well, it turns out that the reason that a lot of students aren't getting the math grades they want is not because they're just bad at math. It's because they're not studying it in the right way. So I'm going to give you 7 ways that you can improve your math grade and potentially increase it by a letter grade or even more. And literally, if you just took like 1 or 2 of these 7 things and put it into practice in your math class, then you will definitely see improvements. So let's get started with the first thing that you can do, which is to take better notes. So let's go to the whiteboard and show you an example of bad notes. I present to you terrible notes. Now, first of all, I hope you actually are taking notes in the first place. That's the first step. If you're not taking notes, take notes. Now, why are the notes on the screen right now bad? Well, first of all, your notes are probably going to have a variety of math topics, and it can be hard to figure out which pages go with which topic. So first of all, we should have what the topic is at the top here, right? In this case, this is a synthetic division problem, so we'll just put synthetic division. I'm also noticing that the problem is not on the page. We should have the problem that we're doing so that we know the steps. But all of those aren't even the biggest issues with these notes. The problem with these notes is that it's all numbers. But you might be asking yourself, how does that make? I mean, math is just numbers, right? Well, if your notes look like this, chances are you're probably just copying what the teacher is putting on the board, which is fine. You should be putting the math that the teacher is doing so that you can refer to it later. But the last thing you want to do is to have copied all these notes and then to look back at it and not know what's going on. Like, if you don't already know how to do synthetic division, this probably looks like a bunch of gibberish to you, and you have no clue where any of these numbers came from. So what we need to get used to doing with our notes is to break this down into steps and describe them with words. So the first step of a synthetic division problem is to take this number here and put it in a box. But if you just had this on your page, you might forget that and you would have no idea. So the best thing you can do is to write step 1 and then describe it in words. It can be the most simple thing ever, like step 1, put in box. It doesn't have to be fancy. You don't have to use fancy math terms that you're not going to understand. Just put it in basic language. But you don't even actually necessarily have to use words. You could just put step 1 and then show that this number here is being moved over here. But you also need to know the information that you need to change the sign. So you could put step 1, change sign. Any information that's important, you would write down and break it down into steps. But there's one problem with this that you might be asking yourself. What if the teacher's just going way too fast and I just don't understand what the teacher's saying and I can't put it into my own words? Well, I have another piece of advice to you to help with that, but we're going to get to that in number 3, because first I need to show you what to do with these notes once they're done. The second way that you can save your math grade is to more effectively study your notes. And if you've watched any other help with studying videos, then you've probably heard that you need to actively engage with your notes. Let's say that you were just learning how to solve for x, how to do multiple step equations. And this is what your notes look like. You have the problem here and you show the steps of how to do it. Now, for other subjects, you often have to come up with some creative ways to actively engage with your notes, like writing quiz questions or doing flashcards. But with math, it's actually really simple. You just need to do more practice problems. So to find practice problems to do, I would recommend just using the textbook. So for example, if you needed to find a good problem to practice, you would probably do something like this. It's very similar to the problem before, but it's different numbers. So try to do it without looking at your notes. And then if you can't do it, then go ahead and refer to your notes. And honestly, the best way to prepare for tests is doing the same exact thing, just doing practice problems. And I would recommend doing them under test conditions. So if you're allowed to use notes on the test, use your notes for the practice. And if you're not allowed to use your notes, then don't use your notes for the practice. And once you're feeling confident with these similar kinds of problems, then you can move on to even harder problems, just harder versions of the same thing, to really make sure that you understand what it is you're doing. And once you start doing harder problems, suddenly the easier ones that are going to be on the test will just feel super easy. Now, for this next method of saving your grade, I'm not going to need the whiteboard for this, but it's really important. And I referred to it earlier. I said, what if you're taking notes, but you don't understand what the teacher's saying? Maybe the teacher's going too fast, and you just don't understand how to put it into your own words. Well, this is an answer that you've probably heard before, and maybe it wasn't the one that you were hoping for in this video, but nevertheless, it's really important. And it's to ask questions. For math, this is super important. You need to ask questions to understand what's happening. Now, am I saying that you need to be that student that raises their hand every 5 seconds asking a question? No, you don't have to. Raising your hand in class is good because it slows down the teacher's pace and helps you to understand what's happening in real time. But I understand that raising your hand in class can be embarrassing, and I can agree with that. So here are some reasons why you should do it anyway. First of all, I think a common fear is that you'll get made fun of by the other students. They'll feel like you're just slowing down their time and that you should know this already. But here, I'm going to let you in on a little secret. All right, here, you ready? You can't tell this to anyone. All right, this is a secret. Nobody else understands it either. Nobody else really understands the math either. And either they're having the same questions as you, or they're just not paying attention and don't care and they're just on their phones. But either way, there are going to be some people in the class that when you raise your hand and ask a question, they had the same question and just had the same fear and didn't want to ask questions in class. But you don't even actually have to raise your hand and ask questions. You can also ask questions after class or during lunch or some other time where you can talk to the teacher one-on-one and figure out where you're struggling. And if you took good notes, then that's going to help even more because you can point out the specific steps that you're stuck on. Now, I want you to also think about this from the teacher's perspective. I know that sometimes it feels like when you're asking questions, you're wasting the teacher's time. Teachers every year are teaching classrooms with less and less engaged students. So I think that if you show that you're engaged with what the teacher is saying by showing good notes and by asking questions regularly, I think a teacher would really appreciate that. I think they'd really appreciate to see someone that's actually paying attention and doing their best. Like literally, I've had college professors tell me that they're surprised to see that I'm taking notes. So show your teacher you're engaged, ask questions, and it will help both you and your teacher and your relationship in the long run. All right, the number 4 way that you can save your grade, and this is really important, and I don't see that many people doing it. And I think a reason a lot of people don't do it is maybe even because it can seem pointless and embarrassing as well, just like asking questions. And that is to learn subtopics from lower classes. So let's say that you're learning how to factor quadratic equations, and factoring quadratic equations when this number is not 1. That's especially confusing. But let's say that, you're understanding some of it, and a lot of it's kind of iffy. But let's say that you're stuck on this last part where you need to solve for x in each case. Now, this x method stuff, this is all new stuff for this lesson. But solving for x, you're supposed to technically already know. And so because of that, your teacher goes really fast because the teacher assumes that you already know how to do this and just zooms by it. So let's say you don't know how to solve for x here. Well, you're going to go on YouTube and try to figure out how to solve this. But what you're going to do is you're not going to go on YouTube and search up how to factor quadratic equations. You're going to search up how to solve for x. And I know it can seem weird and time consuming to be looking up things that you're supposed to already know, but I'm telling you, solving for x is something that comes up all the time. So whenever you don't know how to do something, stop and think about if you're supposed to already know this. And if you are, then go ahead and go back to a previous lesson and review how to do that. Then come back here and go, oh wait, this is just solving for x. I learned from this previous video that I'm supposed to subtract the 1 first, and then I get 2x equals -1, and then you just solve it like normal. And then once you have all the stuff that you're already supposed to know down and you're only confused about new material, like the x method, then you can come back to that video about factoring and learn the x method. Now here's another tip that's a little bit more specific, but I think if you make it a habit, it will help you in the long run, and that is to put down the calculator. Now I'm not saying don't use a calculator. Calculators are super helpful and you should definitely be using them. But I think students tend to over-rely on them and it ends up hurting them in the long run. So let me show you an example of what you can do. Let's say you're solving a problem here and you're like, okay, we've got division. I need to multiply by 7. These will cancel out and I'll just be left with x equals 8 times 7. Oh, what is that again? I learned that in 3rd grade and I just haven't thought of it ever since then. So I'm just going to put it in my calculator. Whenever you have one of those moments where you reach for your calculator, anytime you reach for it, what I want you to do is stop for 10 seconds. So before you pick up your calculator, I want you to just ask yourself, 8 times 7, is this something that I can do without my calculator? And sometimes the answer is going to be no, you just can't, and that's totally fine. But other times you may go, wait a minute, 8 times 7, and even if you have to do the finger stuff, that's fine. Just think of how you would do it in your head. And you'll say, okay, 8 times 7, I think that's 56. And if you want, you can then pick up your calculator and make sure that it's 56. And then you're like, okay, cool, I did it myself. But if after looking at this for 10 seconds and you still can't figure it out, then it's fine. Just pick up your calculator and look at the answer. But the next time that you'll see 8 times 7, you'll be like, wait, can I do this in my head? And eventually, after doing this 10-second thing for multiple times, you'll eventually be like, oh yeah, that was 56. This is going to save you so much time, and it's going to save you a lot of calculator pickups in the future. All right, the 6th way to save your grade in math is something that I think we've all done before, and it's something that we like to do when we're procrastinating, and that is to cram for exams. Don't cram for exams. It may seem like it's most efficient to try to study everything the night before the test because it will all be in your short-term memory. And yeah, there is a little bit of truth to that. Having things in your short-term memory can help if there's something missing from your long-term memory on the test. But for that to work, you need to have things in your long-term memory in the first place. It can't just all be in your short-term memory because it can only hold so much. And also just scientifically, learning things like math, your brain needs to sleep on that information to fully process it. So let's say that you have a test coming up in 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, or let's say you don't even know when your next test is going to be. No matter when your test is, you can space out your practice. So do like 1 or 2 practice problems each day, or a few each week, or whatever you want to do. So just space out your practice. Do like, say, I'm going to do 1 problem today, and then do that problem. And then the next day you'd be like, all right, I'm going to do 1 more problem. And then as the test gets closer, you can do a little bit more problems each day. Now, the last way, and arguably the most important way to save your math grade, is to not get discouraged. I know this is like possibly the most cliche thing you could hear on this channel, and that's because it is. But it's absolutely true. And like, this is one of the things, especially now, when most math homework is online. There's one thing that I hate so much about online homework, and it's that you can be doing a whole problem and you've done all the things correctly, but you miss like 1 negative sign. So you put in your answer and it goes, you're wrong, and doesn't tell you anything else. But a lot of the time you did most of the problem correctly. But oftentimes we just go, okay, I got it wrong. Oh well, next question. That is the worst thing you can do on your homework. You hear everyone say, oh, you're going to need to learn from your mistakes, and you learn more from getting problems wrong than problems right. But that only is true if you stop before you move on to the next problem, look through your work and say, what did I do wrong? And if it was something simple as just forgetting a negative sign, then cool. Make sure you know that you forgot a negative sign so that next problem you can look specifically for negative signs and be very careful and make sure that you don't make that mistake again. And if you made like multiple mistakes on the problem, or you just didn't understand the problem as a whole, then that can be something you review with your teacher, or you just review the lesson as a whole. But you don't need to go back and review the entire lesson if you just messed up 1 negative sign. But this is super important for getting better at anything. It's to figure out what the specific mistakes that you're making are so that you can fix them. And I touched on this before when I talked about asking questions, but like if you go to your teacher and you show your online homework, you show your piece of paper with the work that you did for your online homework, and show the teacher the part that you're confused on and say, I don't really know what I did wrong here, your teacher's going to be impressed. And I'm sure that teacher will be more than willing to help you out and figure out where you went wrong. So those are the 7 ways that you can improve your math grade for the rest of the year. But I'm going to challenge you to do what I talked about at the beginning of this video, and it's just to pick out 1 or 2 right now that you would like to do, and just focus on those 1 or 2. And go ahead and put that into practice starting like tomorrow or whenever you have your next math class. And I'm telling you, it will improve your grades. And then if you get in the habit of those, then you can move on to the other things that I talked about. And as always, remember to not get discouraged over bad grades or wrong answers. Remember that it's all just a learning process. And sometimes the best piece of advice you can have to get better at math is to just not give up with it. It's to just keep trying and doing your best. Now, I said that math, it's really important to practice. And if you're new to the channel here, I do math tutorials on specific subjects as well as these kinds of videos. It's kind of an experiment. I'm trying to do more generic videos that will help you in your math journey. But if you're ever struggling with a specific math topic, I have a lot of videos on different topics that can help you in your math career. So if you want to get started with practice, then I have a full algebra playlist that you can watch right here. So pick out the topic that you're struggling with the most and do some of the problems. And as always, if you have any questions about this video, go ahead and leave it in the comments and I'll be sure to answer your question. Thanks for watching.